Hi friends, I'm Jeffy G. Plugins, plugins, plugins. You might get overwhelmed by just the number of plugin effects that are available to you. But if you already own Logic Pro, did you know that if you go into Plugin Manager and take a look, there's 111 plugins already delivered with the software. I don't even know what they all do. What inspired this video for me is that I had downloaded the Melda Productions free plugins, of which there's 37, and some of them are pretty good. And then subsequently, I got an advertisement for KiloHearts, which also deliver 30 free plugin effects. But KiloHearts goes one step further by delivering this product called Snap Heap, which is like an envelope for grouping together all of your individual effects into a multi-effects unit. But here I was looking at these other vendors when I wasn't even sure what I've already got in Logic.
So just as a reminder, in Logic, you put plugins on the channel strip. So here on track 1, I have an audio track with some vocals in it.
Ain't nobody loves me better.
And those vocals are completely dry. There are no plugins applied. That's one of the first things we might do is probably add EQ. So we might choose a preset for EQ, vintage voice, and we might further tweak this preset a little bit. And after the EQ, you can see inserted here, we can insert another. And we might choose to add compression. There's the standard Logic compressor, or maybe we would choose a preset like for voice. And we might add a de-esser. What I've done is I've inserted 3 of Logic's plugin effects and the EQ. Let's give it a listen.
Ain't nobody loves me better.
Now I could add reverb and delay, or I can send those to a bus. If I choose bus 1 appears in the send channel strip over here. Let's just go with the chromo reverb, and I can send signal to that reverb.
Ain't nobody loves me better.
And you can decide whether to use the bus approach or insert those plugins directly on the channel. Now, rather than have to insert all those plugins individually, you can just choose settings in Logic. So if you look on the second channel here, you'll see I've selected female ambient lead vocal, and that was a complete set of plugins that's been predetermined based on my choices here. It pre-populates all the plugins, the EQ, compressor, limiter, ensemble, space designer, and a bus 1 feed. So there's just a fast way to save all of the inserts. So using the settings, instead of that dry sounding vocal, we have this.
Ain't nobody loves me better. Makes me happy. Makes me feel this way.
And you can do the same with drums, of course. I have a drummer track with the drum kit. It's got channel EQ, compression, a limiter, and clip distortion. And if you pull up a mixer, you're going to see on every channel there are an assortment of plugins. You could have many.
Ain't nobody loves me better. Makes me happy. Makes me feel this way. Ain't nobody loves me better than you.
One other reminder is that Logic differentiates between audio effects and MIDI effects. The MIDI effects only work on MIDI data or MIDI instruments. So let me add an instrument. I'm going to choose the vintage electric piano. You can hear it okay. And off on the left here, I've got a new slot that shows up. I've got audio effects like we've seen before, but I also have MIDI effects. And these are things that will generate MIDI for me. So for example, the chord trigger. When we go through the effects and compare it to what's in KiloHearts and from Melda, we're going to see that there's a difference between MIDI effects and audio effects. Whenever I do some kind of analysis or comparison, I tend to open a spreadsheet. In this case, I've had this spreadsheet going for a while. It's kind of an inventory of all the sounds. I started off interested in how many virtual instruments I actually had, and I have 262 virtual instruments. 23 of them come from Logic. There's the list you're familiar with: Alchemy, or the Vintage Clav, and Retro Synth. They're all listed here. There's 60 that come with Complete 14 from Native Instruments. Arturia delivers 32, and on for a total of 262. But we're not interested in the virtual instruments today. What we're really focused on is more the plugins. So just like the virtual instruments, I went into Plugin Manager and cut and paste all of the plugins. And that's how I came up with 111. I've made some of them bold because those are things that are new that were delivered in the latest version of Logic. Now that alphabetical list doesn't help you very much. It doesn't tell you what they do, and it's not good for comparison. So I created another version of that spreadsheet, and I gathered this information directly from the user manual for Logic Pro. If you open up books, you'll see the same one, and they've grouped together effects in a certain way, and I like the way they're grouped. I just took some liberty in terms of prioritizing how those groups are displayed. And off to the side here in column A, you'll see I have a little star indicating the 20 or 30 plugins that I tend to use over and over again, which I don't think is too unusual. So you've got equalizers, and over in this column E, I've expressed what they do. It just helps me to remember the channel EQ is an 8-band equalizer. Delay effects, reverbs, pitch effects, dynamic processors, filters, modulation effects, a few distortion effects, amps and pedals, some metering tools, plugins. These are the Midi plugins I was talking about. Multi-effects. There are 3 multi-effects that come with Logic. Image processing. If you're doing Dolby Atmos, you're going to make use of these. Some specialized effects, some utilities. Logic still supports some legacy effects, believe it or not. And then there's 34 stomp boxes that are designed for guitar, bass, but you can actually use these stomp boxes for anything. And then 2 that we're missing from the user manual are Beat Breaker and Mastering Assistant. They're new, and they just haven't updated the user manual for those yet. So this spreadsheet I find is a really helpful way to visualize everything that Logic delivers. But my goal here in column F and column G was to map the free plugins that come from Melda in their bundle, of which there's 37, to the equivalent in Logic. And I did my best to do this. It's not perfect. So what you can see here is I've done that mapping, and this is what you get if you download Melda or the KiloHearts free 30. I've color-coded them to make them a little bit easier to understand. For example, here, something called Charm Verb from Melda, which most closely resembles the Chroma Verb in Logic. You see, there's a lot of overlap. All 3 have a compressor. KiloHearts offers some other dynamics that relate to compression. They all offer some kind of filter with modulation effects. These are all the ones that you get with Logic. And then with Melda, here's what you get. And KiloHearts, here's what you get. Of course, none of those third-party vendors have things that I've specifically matched up with the legacy effects in Logic. That just didn't make sense. I guess one unique thing is that with Logic, you get these 34 stomp boxes, and those vendors don't specifically deliver something called a stomp box. Then here at the end, what's interesting is these are the effects from Melda and KiloHearts that you don't get in Logic. Now, some of them may not be that important to you. For example, there's a metronome in Melda, but there's a built-in metronome in Logic. So do you really need another metronome? No. There's a notepad. Do you care that there's a notepad? No. With KiloHearts, they have something called a reverser. Well, you can reverse any audio or create a reverse effect with a digital delay. Do you specifically need a plugin called Reverser? Then there's things that are uniquely different, like the Transgate and the Transient Shaper. So these become the only differences between what's in those bundles and what comes with Logic. I think what you can conclude is that the 111 plugins that come with Logic is far more extensive than what you would get with the free bundle from Melda or the free bundle from KiloHearts.
Now you might say, well, who cares? These bundles are free. Why not get everything that's available if it's free? That was my school of thought, and that's why I downloaded them initially. But what I found was I just had so many plugins that it was getting complicated, and I didn't know what all of them did. So that's what drew me to this analysis of, well, what's really built into Logic? And as I mentioned at the beginning of this, there's around 30 plugins that I use from Logic over and over again. And in my setup, I do use a lot of plugins from UAD. And that's because I have an Apollo interface, and there are some emulations from Universal Audio that Logic just doesn't have. But it does beg the question, if I'm only using 30 of the Logic plugins, what do the rest of them do? And I'm going to tackle that in my next video by going through some of the unusual and different functions that are built into Logic. I've been using Logic for almost 20 years, but there's still a lot to learn. Hey, a lot of work went into putting together that spreadsheet. If you're interested in that and would like to download it, there's a link in the description. It's available on my website for free, and you can download it and take a look at it. It's in Excel. If you found this video interesting and helpful, consider clicking on the like button or leaving a comment. Subscribing to the channel helps me keep things going, and I appreciate any feedback I get. Thanks for watching.